Sometimes a part of the body is hurting, it's bruised, it's wounded. And the body, in and of itself, physiologically, rallies around that pain point to bring healing. Did you ever notice if you have a bruised whatever part of your body, without even thinking, if something is coming near that part of your body, you innately protect? Well, that is a perfect illustration for how this body should operate. See, God has called each of us to make a contribution to the whole of the body, but that contribution is only as healthy and holy as our individual faith in Jesus Christ. I'm calling this assembly in this message to consider what it means to be faithful over successful. Now, I'm not saying that we aren't successful in our faith. I'm saying that we are not to measure successfulness based on the world's definition of it. Jesus, in his teachings, he is paradoxical, means he flips the world's order on its head. While the world prides itself in status, while the world looks at authority and power as being at the top, Jesus, he says, you want to be great in my kingdom? Then be servant of all. Oh, you want to be first? You shall be last. And those that are humbled and okay with being last shall be first. So automatically, we must understand, what does God see and say is faithful? Does God see as faithful? What does God say is faithful? Last week, we looked at a couple verses that showed us what it looks like for Paul and Timothy to engage in suffering. Paul urged Timothy to embrace his own testimony in the Lord. Be faithful with your testimony. Be faithful as you steward the testimony of the Lord. And oh, by the way, do not be ashamed of the gospel, nor his prisoner. He's speaking of himself. That one line, Timothy, do not be ashamed of where the gospel has led me, Paul says. He says there is an unleashing of God's power when we engage in suffering. I say suffering successfully. God's power is ultimately unleashed in that position of weakness and dependence. An independent Christian is likely no Christian at all. Our declaration of dependence is that we need Christ to infuse us with his strength. This is what Paul is saying to Timothy. Last week, we looked at some passages that encouraged us to live boldly. This week, we're going to look at two more verses that encourage us to hold tightly. If we don't hold fast, and that's the translation in my Bible, if we don't hold fast to truth, we risk being held lost by lies. And how many people are being held lost by lies? The Christian is called to hold fast to truth. So let's dive into 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 13 to 14 to understand this charge. The word of the Lord declared, hold fast the pattern of sound words which you have heard from me in faith and love which are in Christ Jesus. Let's take this apart. I want to focus on the word pattern first. I think it's important. Pattern here, I'll give you some synonyms. Outline, sketch, a form, a blueprint, a model. I like this definition. A foundational example or template. In a word, a standard. That was the proper term to express in the construction process a blueprint. What's the standard that is going to keep this project on the right track? We know that as a blueprint. All of my contractors in here, construction workers in here, architects in here, engineers in here, you understand the importance of having a pattern. When I was a child, I remember having an interest in tracing. In fact, I would get my father's police flashlight, those heavy flashlights, and I would place it in between my knees underneath a glass table. And then I would place whatever I was tracing on that glass table, and then I would put an overlay paper on it, and then I would trace what was being illuminated by the light. And then you would see that what was on the overlay paper was pretty close as the original product. This is what it means to be a Christian. Christ is the template. His word is our foundational example. And when we place our life over top of his life and we let the light shine on our life, that gives us the reflection that the world needs to see.